we had a compound that was 1,500 feet long by 800 feet wide. And every direction you look is the enemy, okay? And there are infantry units and squads and stuff out in the boonies all around us. And almost daily, somebody would run into the enemy and get in trouble. And the first thing they do is call for guns. So we're always ready for that. Besides our regular assigned missions, we're always ready for those calls. Mm-hmm. And usually when they call, they need you pretty bad. So that's what we were about. My job was protecting the guys on the ground and protecting other helicopters primarily.
What do you recall about your very first mission in combat?
It was noisy, and they always pick on the new guy, right? So I was flying a slick, and on the approach end, the door gunners move up and get kind of close, so it's very noisy with the door gun going. They also like to shoot brass and bounce it off your helmet. And if you're really unlucky, it goes down your collar and will burn you. But you know to button your top collar if you're the new guy.
Right.
But other than that, it's scary, but you do it. You don't think too much about it. You just do your job.
Yeah.
And when you're flying a helicopter, especially when you're a new guy, you're not long out of flight school. So you're concentrating very hard on making that plane go where you want it to. And you're in formation, you're close to other planes. So you're concentrating so hard, you don't have time to think about much else.
Right.
You just get in, dump those guys off, and get out of there.
So you're flying troop to carrier missions.
Yeah.
Or when you first start.
And then you do resupply, and then you do, all kinds of ash and trash. You do all kinds of missions, and some combat assaults. Where you're putting the troops in and getting them out.
What's a typical day like? If there is a typical day.
Well, a lot of times you don't have the troops where you are. You have to fly to the troops. So that's usually some little outpost or something, and there's a little airstrip there, and they're never ready. So you sit down on the ground and you shut down, and a lot of times you cook a meal or something while you're waiting on them, or read a book or something. And every now and then, these big infantry sergeants would come out and want a tour of the gunship, because they've been in the slicks, the Hueys, but they've never gotten close to a gunship, and they're curious. So I would give them the tour, and I got to tell you, back then I weighed 125 pounds and looked like I was 12, honestly. And I was just wearing a T-shirt, so I'm giving these guys the tour of the thing. And then the guy on the radio says, "Scramble the guns, we got a mission." And I picked up my shirt and put it on, and it had my rank and my wings on it. And these sergeants looked at me and went, "You're the pilot?" Because I looked like a little kid. But there were a lot of guys like me. We all were kids.
Yeah,
we had one guy in the gun platoon that was 28 years old, and we all thought he was ancient. And we nicknamed him Pappy. And and I'd catch him going into the mess hall and come up behind him and grab his arm and go, "Pappy, let me help you in the club," and get away. But we honestly thought 28 was old.
Yeah.
I was 20. There were guys that were 19 flying. So you figure they've already been through flight school and everything. And 19 still.
Yeah. How long were you flying slicks before you transitioned to gunships?
About 2 or 2.5 months. It happened pretty quick.
Yeah.
And I couldn't wait to get there.
Yeah.
If you're going to be in a war, you're either the shooter or the shootee. I want to be able to shoot back. And just my nature.
Right.
Back then, I was awfully small, but I was very aggressive. And that was another factor. You got to be aggressive. And I'm very laid back now, but aggressive then.
Yeah.
I got shot down twice doing what I was doing, and I got picked up by one. It's kind of a funny story.
Yeah, tell us about the first time you shot down.
I was the trail ship, and the lead ship's radios went out, so I took over the mission. And the Air Force FAC spotter put us on some hooches, and what it was a MACV compound. MACV are American advisors to Vietnamese troops, and they had a compound, and it had been overrun the night before, and the MACV guys got in bunkers, and either our ships or Puff the Magic Dragon hosed it down with minigun all night long until daylight. Well, I'm the first team that gets there at daylight. And what I didn't know was the North Vietnamese had moved in anti-aircraft weapons, quad 50s, during the night, but they didn't crank them up because the muzzle flash would give their position away. So I get there at daylight and I have to deal with him. And on the first run, my rocket sight disappeared. It's right here. And it just disappeared. A 50 round hit it and it just was gone, like that. It didn't just knock it off the ceiling, it just disintegrated. And either a piece of that rocket sight or the piece of the bullet hit me here and just about cut my helmet strap in two. But it's kind of like being in a fight. If you get hit, you can't go, oh, that really hurt. You're busy, Yeah. And so I just sort of ignored it. And on the next run in, around, not a 50, but a AK round, came through the door and got me in the leg. Then I started the third run in after checking on the other crew and my crew. Everyone's fine, so we make another run. And just as I start, I'm in a 90-degree bank and I'm looking at the target through the window that's over my head. And I'm starting to roll in, and the last thing you do is check your engine instruments and make the run. And the engine instruments are in the center of the dash, and I always turned them to where my needles were always when it's operating, all my needles are horizontal. And they had Phillips screw there, you can turn them. And two of them were unwinding. Engine oil and torque were unwinding. So I know I'm about to lose an engine. So instead of turning on the target, I turned towards a friendly position, and then the engine quit, and I fell way short of the friendly position. And on the way down, I started losing rotor RPM, and I knew to flare the plane back to fan that rotor, but it didn't help. And turns out the transmission seized, and we hit upside down. I always tell people, I don't recommend it. We hit on the side of a hill, upside down, and rolled end over end up the hill about 2 times. And I completely wrote myself off on the way down. I said out loud, I didn't key the mic so anyone else could hear it, but I said out loud to myself, well, this is it. And after that crash, it's real noisy, and dusty and everything. And all of a sudden it stops and it's dead quiet. And I'm sitting there in my seat, still strapped in, looking at my hands going, damn, I'm still alive. And right about then, either a mortar round or a grenade went off outside my door. So I undid my belt, and that's when I realized I'm upside down. Crashed into the ceiling, crashed over the co-pilot, and went out. His door had been ripped off. And I went out the opening where his door was and landed on the ground, stood up and looked at him and said, excuse me for stomping all over him. The look on his face was priceless. You know how you say something to a dog and they don't understand, they cock their head? When I said, excuse me, he went, what? Get me out of here. And he was kind of wedged in. I had to work a little to get him freed and get him out. crew chief was thrown out of the plane rolled over him, but didn't touch him. The gun mount stuck in the ground next to him, and the ship teeter-tottered over that, so it didn't crush him or anything. But he was shot twice. The door gunner was unconscious, just dangling in his belt when I started, and he woke up when I was getting the pilot free. He woke up and climbed out of the plane. We pulled the crew chief out, and every picture of me ever in Vietnam, I have a watch and a compass. And when we were falling out of the sky, I took a note of the heading to that friendly position, and I remembered that heading. I don't today for some reason, but I did then. And after all of that, I remember going, we need to go that way. And any other direction, we wouldn't have made it. You know, we would have either been killed or captured. But that compass did the trick, okay? That took us 2 hours to make it to the friendly compound. And so we were crawling and dragging the crew chief along, and they got very close to us, and we had to stop. And I could hear the feet swishing through the grass, and I could hear them talking. And I'm laying on my back, and all I have is .45 pistol. And I'm trying to keep the crew chief quiet. And just as they were very close to us, 2 F-100s showed up. And they're shooting that cannon of theirs and all of this. They're making a lot of noise, and the noise was helpful because we could move then, not give our position away. So we're moving uphill the whole time on a heading that we pretty sure will take us to that friendly compound. And they shot down the lead F-100. That guy took off up, punched out, and drifted away. The special forces later rescued him. I read the after-action reports, how I know that. So then it got quiet again, and we had to stop moving, and they got very close to us again. And good timing, 2 F-4s showed up. I just thought F-100s were loud. F-4s, oh my gosh, they were incredible. And they were so low and they weren't going very fast. And but they were tearing up the area, you know. And while they're doing that, we're making it up the hill. And we eventually got to the friendly compound and got inside. I thought we were safe when we got there. There was a wall about, I don't know, 2.5, 3 feet tall. And I sat down behind that wall. My co-pilot was a Special Forces lieutenant, so he knew first aid, so he's working on the crew chief. And I look around, and all the MACV guys, the advisors, are in their OD underwear and steel helmets. They had been hit in the middle of the night by surprise, and they never got dressed. And I remember the guy in charge was a major, and I can picture in my mind him standing there in underwear and the helmet with the oak leaf on the front. And they're just, that place is a shambles. You imagine, it's been shot up with minigun all night long, and it had been overrun. So there's bodies and weapons laying around and all kinds of stuff. He said, we have an M60, but we don't have any ammo for it. And I said, well, that helicopter's full of it because we didn't get to use it all. And he said, well, would you mind going and getting some? And I don't know what I was thinking. I did it. I went with a sergeant because there was a minefield out there, and he knew the way. And we ran through all of that and went back to the ship. The original trip from the helicopter to the friendly compound was 2 hours. The trip back, no time at all, because we were running. We weren't crawling, okay? And they weren't chasing us. And we made it to the ship, got the ammo. That's when I realized my back really hurts. I couldn't hold anything. And it never got checked till I got back to the States, but I had compound fractures in my back and neck, and I just didn't know it. So got the ammo back. little bit later, a dust-off ship comes in, and he lands right in the middle of the compound. And there are Vietnamese soldiers there that most Americans that have worked with them are not real impressed with the Vietnamese army. Okay, I like the Vietnamese people, especially the Montagnards, but their army really sucked. Okay, and what happened was, as soon as that helicopter touched down, the Vietnamese troops in that compound went in that helicopter because they wanted the hell out of there. And you would have had to break their arms and legs to get them to leave. So I got my crew chief in and my door gunner in, and I stepped up on the skid. You know, there's a step on the front of the skid. And I stepped up there and looked in the window at the pilot, and I knew him. And he was a captain, and he was from Texas. He was kind of short and very stocky and strong, and he was chewing tobacco, and it was kind of running down the corner of his mouth. And I said, Lieutenant Pratt and I are staying. You are grossly overloaded. You'll never get out of here. He looked out that window at me. He looked like a pit bull. And he looked out that window and he said, "Get your bony little ass in here. I am not coming back." Yes, sir. So I wedged in, the lieutenant wedged in the back somewhere, and I literally sat on the console between the pilot and co-pilot. It was the only space left. Now, there's a gauge in a helicopter that tells you how much power you're pulling when you go to take off, called the N1 gauge. It reads in percent. When it went past 100, I quit looking at it, okay, because I knew he wasn't going to make it. He did. One of the reasons is dust-off ships have to do hoist missions. So they tweak their engines, they get them tuned perfect, and they clean the blades in the engines, the process they use. And when those blades are clean, they make more power. So he had a lot more power than my gunship. That's why he made it. We didn't have a hospital. We had a tent. And I was laying on a cot in the tent, and they started bringing in people that were really wounded. I mean, seriously wounded. And I felt guilty in that cot. So I rolled out of it. I couldn't sit up because of the back problems. I rolled out of it, got on my knees, and stood up. The lieutenant said, "Where are you going?" I said, "I'm going to the hooch. I feel guilty in here." He said, "Hold on, I'll go with you." He rolls out of his cot and stands up, and we leave. 2 days after this crash, we go over to the flight surgeon and lobby to get back on flight status. He doesn't want to do it, but we convinced him that we're safe enough, and those guys have been flying day and night, and they're way more dangerous because they're tired. We're not. So he agreed, but he said, "You guys can't fly together?" And he looked at me and says, "You can't fly as an aircraft commander. You have to fly as a co-pilot." Fine. So went over there and told them we're back on flight status. The next morning, we both launched. He was in the lead ship, I was in the trail, and we went on another mission in the exact same place at Ducklop. The lead ship took a lot of hits and went down. And they told us on the radio that Lieutenant Pratt had been hit, and it's very serious. And so they went down, they landed very close to that MACV compound. And I'm flying as co-pilot, and when we were out of ammo, we had completed our mission, we're out of ammo. Gunships don't pick up people. Never in the history of my company have I ever heard of it or seen it, okay? They don't do it because they're not good at it, all right? But no one had said a word in that airplane. And I'm folding my minigun sight up into the ceiling, and I look over my shoulder at the crew, and they're throwing barrels and cases of sea rations, and I guarantee you that case they throw out, the peaches and and pound cake have already been taken out. That's the prize in the case. So they're throwing that out and getting rid of smoke grenades and any weight and anything that's taking up room. They're making room for that lieutenant. And no one said a word. I was so proud of them. And sure enough, we fly in, land next to that ship, pick up Lieutenant Pratt, and go to take off. It's kind of like a Goonie bird running and trying to take off. You know, we get off the ground. And when we're about 25 feet, we went right past where I crashed 3 days earlier. We're about 25 feet, and some North Vietnamese guy empties an AK all the way down the right side of the ship. And the aircraft commander, Brad Jones, a round comes through his chin bubble, goes through his pedal, his left boot. It creased his toe, but that's all. Came between his legs, behind the stick, and hit him right here in the chest protector. And it stopped the bullet. The chest protector stopped the bullet. But it was like someone hit him with a sledgehammer. I mean, it knocked the mess out of him. And because of the ceramic material and the bullet fragmenting, it hit him all under here, and it was like someone slung a paintbrush at me. Of course, I grabbed the controls, and we're wobbling all over the place, but we save it. And the crew pulls the red handles and folds his seat back and slides him in the back so they can check him out. Sidebar. I'm also the armament officer, so when a gunship comes out of maintenance, it's stripped of all the guns and rockets and tubes and all that. So when they're done with maintenance, they put all that back on, but it's got to be bore sighted and test fired. Well, that was my job, one of my other jobs. Well, every time I did that, when I went out for the test fire, it was about a 30-minute flight out and back. I took that opportunity to teach the gun crew chiefs how to fly. Okay? I didn't teach them how to hover. I taught them how to line it up on the runway and fly it into the ground. It's very survivable if you do that, okay? You don't have to be going fast. You can land at 20 or 30 knots. It's no big deal. But they all got pretty good at it. But hovering would have been out of the question trying to teach that. So now, go back to Ducklop. The crew chief's name is a guy named Wuso. And I go, Wuso, get up here. So he climbs in that seat, folds it back up, climbs in it, he's hooking up. And I said, Buccaneer 8 is behind you. He'll tell you how to get out of here and give you a heading to get home. Remember what I told you, do not hover for any reason. Line it up with the runway and fly it into the ground at about 20 to 30 knots. And he never said a word. And I glanced over at him, and his eyes were about that big. But I knew he could do it. But nothing happened to me that day, and so I got to fly it home. But it sure was reassuring knowing he's sitting there just in case. Okay? Now, 2 of those crew chiefs that I taught to fly went back to the States, went through flight school, came back as warrant officers. So it was a useful endeavor.
Your second time being shot down.
I was covering for someone else. I'm 30 days left to go in country. Most helicopter companies, if you've had a full tour, then when you get down to 30 days, you're on ash and trash and the easy missions. You're not doing combat assaults and things. They kind of schedule you out of that. And I was at that stage, and the guy that was on gun standby said, I'm fixing to grab a shower real quick. Can you cover for me? I said, sure. He didn't even get wet. And we got hit, and I had to go fly. And it was getting dark. And by the time I got up, it was pretty much dark. I made a run after the artillery was shooting from downtown, and I can't make a run on. I know where the enemy is. I can see the flashes of the mortar tubes, and but I can't make a run on it because the artillery's there. And I finally get it shut off, and the artillery gives you splash on the last round, cleared to go in. Boom, I make the run. And just as I get to the bottom of that run and pull power and come up and to the right, artillery round goes off underneath me. And a huge chunk of shrapnel went through and took out both hydraulic lines. The Charlie model gun has dual hydraulics, but because it's a converted dust-off ship, they didn't do they didn't run one line down one side and one down the other. They run right next to each other, and they're even tied together. So one piece of shrapnel took out both hydraulic deals. And on the Charlie model, when the hydraulics quits, and you cannot move this stick, the up and down. It's frozen where it is, and King Kong couldn't move it. Well, I had a lot of power pulled in when it quit. There is a thing called an accumulator that gives you 4 movements. It didn't work. I tried it, it didn't work. So now I'm stuck, and I'm climbing, and it's at night, and I don't know what else has been hit. And I started rolling the throttle back, and I slowed the rotor down to where it's going. It's got a lot of pitch in it.
Yeah.
And I had to have them turn on the runway lights. They're still being hit. I said, turn on the runway lights just momentarily. I need to know where you are, because everything on the ground is black. You know, there's no lights on the ground over there. You fly at night. Nighttime flying in Vietnam was scary. Okay. And so once I figured out where the runway was, I flew it into the ground and slid to a stop. And they were still mortaring us, so we had to get out of the plane and get in the ditch, and, you know, till the mortar attack was over. And that was doubly scary because I had 30 days left to go in country.
But not as bad as the first one.
No.
As far as your injuries go.
And there were many a days you took hits and, you know, limped home and all, but it was, you know, we never thought about it. I'm sure you read in the bio, I'm a DSC recipient, okay? I never knew. None of those medals. It was just, you know, when we finished that day, we went to the club, we drank too much, and the next morning we were at the next mission, you know, and I never thought about it. This is kind of funny. I wanted to go on R&R. You usually start thinking about that at 6, 7 months in country. So I started submitting the paperwork to go on R&R. They kept losing it. I got to 10 months in country, still no R&R. So I went over to the CO's office and knocked on the door, you know, went in. I said, is there anything you can do to get my paperwork through so I can go on R&R? And he said, I can't let you go on R&R right now. General Abrams is coming up here to pin a medal on you. First I heard of it. I had no idea. And he said the DSC. I'd never heard of that. I really didn't know what it was. And honestly, the thought that went through my mind, and you got to remember, I'm 10 months in country, and I've been in my share of combat. Can he just mail it? You know, really. I don't like pomp and ceremony. Most warrants don't. Okay.
What do you want people to know about your service?
It was me and thousands of other guys. We're all doing our job. I always I never let anybody say I was just a clerk or I was just, I stop them. I never let them use the word just, because when I was flying that gunship and pushed this thumb down, that's how you fire a rocket, okay? You know how many people had to do their job for that rocket to be there and work? And you can follow that rocket all the way back to the States. It's hundreds of people had something to do with that rocket.
Yeah.
And they're all necessary. You take any of them out and this doesn't work and I'm in trouble. You know, so I appreciate what everyone does. Got to be there.
Yeah.
You know?
What advice would you give somebody who maybe is thinking about military service? Or,
Very first one would be get in shape. I'm amazed, and you've probably seen it too. People get at basic training, can't do 3 push-ups, and you're going to be a target. If you can't do them, you're going to be a target. And why put yourself in for all that harassment? So if you're in shape, basic training's easy, So get in shape would be the first thing. And then play the game. They tell you to do 50 push-ups, do them. Crawl in the mud, do it. Smile when you're doing it. They'll leave you alone. Eventually, there's someone that's going to gripe about it or can't do it, and they'll go pick on them and leave you alone because you're no fun.
Yeah.
So play the game.